Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're tackling something absolutely massive. We're going to take roughly 5,000 years of incredibly dense, dramatic, world-shaping history and compress it into one sleek, visual journey. Look, the Middle East is a region that has touched pretty much every single aspect of human civilization. So we're going to break down exactly how that happened step by step.
To really get a grip on this region, you've got to start with the geography. The Middle East isn't just a location on a map. It's literally the crossroads of the world. Think of it as a unique geographic bridge connecting East and West. And honestly, this single geographic reality has driven absolutely everything in its history. It's the reason we saw the ancient Hellenistic exchange of ideas, the bustling continent-spanning trade of the Silk Road, and, fast-forwarding to today, it's the very bedrock of modern global oil politics. Everything, and I mean everything, flows through this crossroad.
Since 5 millennia is a whole lot of ground to cover, here's our roadmap for today so we stay on track. First, the cradle of civilization. Second, the rise of the caliphates. Third, invasions and Ottoman dominance. Fourth, drawing the modern map. And finally, the modern geopolitical chessboard.
Let's move to and see how this builds. Part 1, the cradle of civilization.
Imagine we're zooming way out, looking down at the ancient world. This is where human society as we know it actually took root. Around 3150 BC, ancient Egypt and the Sumerians in Mesopotamia emerge, making these massive civilizational leaps. We're talking inventing agriculture and writing, which, fun fact, wasn't originally for poetry, it was just to track taxes. Jump to the 6th century BC and Cyrus the Great's Achaemenid Empire unites this totally disparate region for the very first time. Then, in 334 BC, Alexander the Great invades. This sparks an incredible fusion of Greek and local cultures, a huge multicultural exchange bridging East and West. Finally, by the 1st century BC, the Roman Empire stretches its reach across the map, kicking off the Pax Romana. This brings deep economic integration and paves the way for the massive spread of Christianity across the region.
But, that Roman hold wasn't going to last forever. The region eventually cracked into a colossal superpower rivalry. On one side, you've got the Byzantine Empire championing Christianity from Constantinople. On the other, the Sasanian Empire, rooted in Persia and Zoroastrianism. From the 3rd to the 7th centuries, they were just locked in continuous, grinding conflict. The real crucial takeaway here is their devastating war from 602 to 628 AD. It utterly exhausted and politically destabilized both of these massive empires, leaving behind a historic power vacuum. And that vacuum was about to change the world forever.
Part 2. Rise of the Caliphates.
Now let's slow down for a second, because in the 7th century, humanity hits a massive historical inflection point. Right into that exhausted vacuum left by the Byzantines and Sasanians stepped a revolutionary new force. In 610 AD, Islam emerges in the Arabian Peninsula with the Prophet Muhammad. This unprecedentedly unites the Arab tribes. Following his death, swift military conquests just sweep in to fill the void. Within barely 2 decades, Muslim forces took Syria, Egypt, and entirely dismantled the Sasanian state. This wasn't just a simple military victory, it was a total civilizational replacement. Arabic completely supplanted Greek and Persian as the language of administration, locking in a brand new Islamic imperial order.
And this consolidation, it kicked off one of the absolute most intellectually thrilling periods in human history, the Abbasid Golden Age. Centered right in their newly built capital of Baghdad, this era brilliantly synthesized global cultures. They established the House of Wisdom. This was a library so incredibly vast, it preserved the world's classical Greek texts and pushed massive leaps forward in algebra, medicine, and astronomy. Plus, economically, they tightly controlled the Silk Road. They perfectly utilized the region's geography as the world's crossroads to supercharge trade and innovation between the East and the West.
Part 3. Invasions and Ottoman dominance. Of course, empires of that sheer size are incredibly tough to hold together. The Islamic world started to fragment, leaving it super vulnerable to some truly terrifying external threats. From the West came the religiously motivated Crusades in the late 11th century. But an even more catastrophic threat blew in from the East, the Mongols. In 1258, they absolutely devastated Baghdad. Legend actually says the Tigris River ran black with the ink of all the destroyed books from the House of Wisdom. But, as they say, history abhors a vacuum. Out of the ashes of this fragmented landscape, a minor frontier state rose up. The Ottomans captured Constantinople in 1453, symbolically ending the Roman Empire in the East, and by the mid-16th century, they hit their absolute zenith, recreating a vast, multi-ethnic unity across the Middle East. As the Ottomans expanded, a major rival stepped up in the early 16th century, the Safavid dynasty over in Persia. And this brilliantly illustrates a pivotal shift. The crucial difference? The Ottomans championed Sunni Islam, while the Safavids established Shia Islam as their official state religion. This intense 16th century rivalry forged two ideologically opposed powers. It's exactly here, in this specific historical clash, that the seeds were firmly planted for the enduring Sunni and Shia geopolitical divides that we still see across the Middle East today.
Part 4. Drawing the modern map.
As we zoom in on the 20th century, we see the collapse of the Ottomans literally drawing the borders of the modern map. The Ottoman Empire had aligned with Germany in World War I, which turned out to be a disastrous move. After their defeat, European colonial powers swept in. Through the secret Sykes-Picot Agreement, diplomats basically just took rulers to maps to carve up the region, and the League of Nations handed out mandates legitimizing their control. Britain took Iraq, Transjordan, and Palestine, while France grabbed Syria and Lebanon. The incredibly important takeaway here is that these artificial borders were drawn with pretty much zero regard for the complex, ethnic, tribal, and sectarian realities actually existing on the ground.
So as those European powers finally withdrew after the Second World War, the region was left incredibly volatile. In 1947, the UN proposed a partition plan to divide Palestine into separate Jewish and Arab states. Following this, Israel officially declared independence in 1948. In immediate reaction, neighboring Arab states invaded. The ensuing conflict resulted in Israel expanding its territorial control, while hundreds of thousands of Palestinian Arabs were displaced, becoming refugees. It was a strict action and reaction sequence that hardwired a deeply complex conflict into the region for decades to come.
In the wake of those messy post-colonial shifts, new ideologies popped up trying to unite the region. The biggest one was Pan-Arabism, heavily championed by Egypt's Gamal Abdel Nasser. But ultimately, Pan-Arabism faltered. A toxic mix of ideological disunity, lingering economic struggles, and the real turning point, the swift and devastating defeat of Arab states by Israel in the 1967 Six-Day War, entirely shattered this vision. This massive military failure severely discredited secular nationalist regimes in the eyes of everyday people, fundamentally shifting regional dynamics yet again.
Part 5. The Geopolitical Chessboard.
Okay, we are now entering the highly complex modern age, where immense oil wealth, heavy foreign intervention, and powerful religious ideologies violently collide. And honestly, it all hinges on one year, 1979. Take a second to let that number sink in. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that if you want to understand the modern Middle East, you have to understand that this single year permanently and irrevocably rewired the entire region. Here is exactly why 1979 was such an earthquake. We had two massive, totally contradictory events happen at almost the exact same time. On one side, a breakthrough in diplomacy, the Camp David Accords, where Egypt became the very first Arab country to make peace with Israel. But literally on the same timeline, you had the Iranian Revolution. The Western-backed Shah was overthrown and an Islamic Republic was established. This completely ruptured ties with the US and introduced a fierce, radical model of political Islam. This revolution terrified secular Arab regimes and Sunni monarchies alike, igniting a brand new ideological rivalry that is still burning across the region right now. What followed was just decades of cascading violence, fueled by these new regional rivalries and a rapidly expanding Western military footprint. In 1980, reacting to the Iranian Revolution, Iraq invades Iran, starting a brutal 8-year war. Crippled by the debt from that exact war, Iraq then invades Kuwait in 1990. That triggers the Gulf War and a huge influx of U.S. military bases into the region. Deep resentment of this Western presence helped fuel radical groups like al-Qaeda, which led directly to the catastrophic 9/11 attacks in 2001. That, in turn, prompted the U.S. War on Terror and the 2003 invasion of Iraq, which toppled Saddam Hussein but plunged the entire country into devastating sectarian conflict. All this instability basically set the stage for a massive domino effect. Enter 2011 and the Arab Spring. We saw popular uprisings demanding democratic reforms sweep across the region. While some regimes actually fell, others completely refused to yield, triggering brutal, drawn-out civil wars, especially in Syria, Libya, and Yemen. This chaos created yet another massive power vacuum. Drawing strength from highly disaffected communities, ISIS emerged, seizing huge swaths of territory. Ultimately, these fractured nations just turned into chaotic arenas for multi-nation proxy wars.
Which brings us right to the intensely multipolar landscape we see today. It's like a giant geopolitical chessboard. You have Iran actively expanding its influence through a complex network of proxy militias across what's often called the Shia Crescent. Then you have Saudi Arabia and its Gulf allies, pushing back hard against Iran to maintain their own security and ideological leadership. And finally, you've got Turkey, aggressively reasserting its historical ambitions with a highly independent foreign policy and its own military deployments. These three spheres are just constantly colliding, making for a fiercely contested geopolitical map.
So we're basically left with a region full of profound contradictions. On the one hand, you have the 2020 Abraham Accords marking a really significant shift toward diplomatic normalization, happening right alongside jaw-dropping modernization and economic growth fueled by Gulf oil wealth. Yet right alongside all that progress, you have persistent authoritarianism, systemic corruption, and those deep-rooted sectarian rivalries we've been tracking together since the 16th century. It's a remarkably complex reality, heavily shaped by the long shadow of foreign intervention.
Which brings us right back to where we started. The Middle East has always been, and really always will be, that geographic bridge connecting East and West. But looking forward, we are left with one absolutely critical question. Will the Middle East succumb to its long history of division, or will it realize its incredibly rich potential as the crossroads of the world? It's a fascinating question, and one I sincerely hope you're now eager to explore even further.